Everyone. So nice to have everyone here and to see everyone's faces. I actually am trying something new, a Zoom feature, which is focusing, but I'm wondering if it's on focus mode. So it's supposed to only show the co-host and the host, but I'm wondering if everyone sees in their gallery everyone else's faces, or do you just see eight of us or six of us?
I only see 8 of us as faces and others as names.
Okay. So I just want to check in. It's a little bit of an experiment on creating focus, but also feeling the community around us. How do you all feel about how it's set up right now? Yeah. Okay.
Well, on mine, I've turned the feature on that says hide non-video participants,
Okay.
which makes larger pictures of the hosts,
Okay.
which feels like that might be helpful. And that would also mean that as hosts, if we turn off our own video, then we don't appear. So if I turn off my video right now, I might disappear from your screen if you've got hide non-video participants. And so then as hosts, as if we are not presenting, we might turn ourselves off to give more of a spotlight to the folks who are presenting.
There's a lot of focus mode is ending. Okay. I think for all.
Sorry, I accidentally did that. I was trying to do the thing that Frankie said, but I couldn't figure it out.
It's okay. Well, yeah, you're a host, so you can do a lot. And we still have some people coming into the room. So and we can talk about a little bit about the song. And I think Elizabeth, she's here, is the only one that's heard it. So it's one of my partner and I, we produced this for the Good Listening Project, along with some other songs for our podcast. So I thought, yeah, what a great way to enter the room. You might be hearing that a lot more this year. So now everyone's disappeared. I just want us to take the time. I know we had 3 minutes, but we also still have some people entering the room, which is awesome, which is amazing. But I'd like us to take a minute. It's a tradition here at the Good Listening Project when we run our weekly team meetings to take the first part of our time together, the first minute of our time together, to just kind of drop down, have a breath, and relax. You're welcome to leave your video on or to turn it off. It's 109 right now, but let's go to 111. You'll hear my voice again when we're coming back. I welcome you back. Welcome, everyone, to the Good Listening Project's Poetry Salon, readings that reveal. I'm so happy to see all your faces. Feel with so much gratitude for you giving your time and your space and your energy to share, to be open to listen, to learn about what we do, and for us to learn a little bit more about our community as well. Today we have 3 of us sharing. Frankie Aberland, who is our executive director, and also a listener poet, OG listener poet. He will be sharing his poem today, Heroes and Soldiers, along with his poemee, Mary Beth. She's joining us here today. Thank you, Mary Beth. You could just speak your voice into the space. That would be great. I would love for you to say hello.
Hi. Thanks for having us, DJ.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor.
We also have Mindy Shaw, one of our listener poets here. She will share today her poem and her process for her poem, Patient.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see all of you, and welcome Mary Beth and other poemees.
And we have Linda, who was a poemee that I worked with, and we will be sharing our poem and our process and learning and discovering some things about each other.
So great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
And we have Kelly Nolan. She is one of our alum from our last cohort, CLP cohort. She will be moderating the chat today. And she's so much more than an alum from our cohort. She's just filled with so many gifts, amazingness, and I'm really grateful that she accepted to be really a witness as part of the chat moderator to the discussion. So she will be, engaging. If you have any reflections, drop them in the chat. And at the end, we will be harvesting any comments or questions. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's so wonderful to be with all of you today.
So let's just kind of drop it down into it. And I'd like everyone to, hi, Ravenna. I really, the voice is so important, the sound of our voice, like the resonance. And I'd like everyone to share a word for their day, a word of the day, a word of the moment, actually, into the space. And you can throw it out there. You don't have to think about it too much. And it won't take too long. I will just say your name in the order that it's on my screen, and I'll start with Joe Linder. Peaceful. Shayna Burns. Caitlin. Gina.
Deja Zoom.
Elizabeth Pringle.
Horizons.
Nice. Ravenna,
Excited.
Nico, Jenny,
Warm.
Warm, Gregory,
Redemption.
Redemption, Mindy,
80s music.
music.
There's a story, but I'll save it for later.
Sure. Frankie,
Flexibility.
Linda,
I'm gonna go with new experiences.
Mary Beth,
Gratitude.
Kelly,
Did you say me? Sorry.
that's very good.
Held.
Help. Meaningful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for offering, giving sharing your colors of the moment and your tone of the moment with us. It creates this environment in a virtual space to have, it's like the color of the wall, the wallpaper, the color of the curtains. So today, Frankie and Mary Beth, we're going to talk a little bit about your moment together, your time together, and what came out of it, which is the poem, Heroes and Soldiers. So I know I sent a list of questions loosely what we're going to touch on today in terms of the process. And we'll start with Frankie. Let's start with the title and your process. I'm going to put the poem on the screen and the origin story, but Frankie, would you mind reading the origin story or talk loosely about the origin of the poem?
Yeah. And you said I've got it on my computer. If that would be helpful, I can just pull it.
You
There
can,
we go.
yeah, if you want to. Perfect.
Yeah. Here's the poem. And maybe I'll start by reading the poem first. And then we can talk about it. And then Beth, maybe you can read it at the end. Here's this poem, Heroes and Soldiers. I want to do my job not as a soldier, not as a brave fighter, not as the greatest generation making do with what we've got, because by gosh, we will fight them on the beaches. But as the professional I trained to be, using standard supplies and procedures, noticing the flower outside my window, not because it is respite from chaos, but because it is springtime. Not because it is respite from chaos, but because it is springtime. So Mary Beth and I talked in April of 2020. This is almost 3 years ago. And this was a time when people were saying, everybody was still shocked by this pandemic and thinking like, what can I do? I'm at home, like I've been told to just watch Netflix and chill at home, and that's all actually alone. And that's how I'm supposed to contribute. But like maybe I can express some gratitude to healthcare workers who are out there like actually leaving their homes and or leaving their comfort zone, or not just watching TV on the sofa, but going into the thick of this. And they're heroes. That seems really obvious. And like I'm going to make big signs and put them in my window and clap at 7 o'clock every night, and say like, wow, I'm drawing you with keep on, and sending you a photograph of this, or like posting it on my social media. Like social workers are the heroes of our time. And talking with Mary Beth is as I remember, a social worker. And you were saying like that I don't want to be a superhero. I don't want to be a warrior that's like in this chaotic world. That seeing a flower and like trying to use it as a tool to cope, or a respite from chaos. But just like as a normal person, just, oh, flowers are beautiful because they're beautiful. And I'm noticing it because it has come out of the ground, not because I need to meditate to survive. So heroes and soldiers, I think maybe my impression from talking with Mary Beth was that's not what she signed up to be. She signed up to be just a healer or a healthcare worker, or somebody who could help guide people in the ordinary challenges of being a human being, and sometimes being ill or having some sort of struggles that could use benefit from professional expertise. Mary Beth, I'm handing you the mic. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, hearing you talk about, people who, because I wasn't one of those people that had to stay home, and so hearing you talk about, just wanting something to be able to do, I think I have a little perspective on that now, because time has passed and there's distance from that pain and that fear, and that frustration. But at the time, yeah, I was really resentful and angry about people calling us heroes. I saw it as a way to assuage guilt, or just make people feel better, right? And of course, people want to feel better when things are scary and when people are dying. And so, yeah, it was hard. It was a really hard time to be a healthcare worker. It's still not easy. But I think the part about wanting to just do my job, we couldn't just do our jobs. We didn't have what we needed to do our jobs. We didn't have safety in our facilities. We didn't have proper PPE to be protecting ourselves. And so out of that fear and frustration, I wanted people to be angry at. And so it was anger at the system that allowed this to happen and be so bad. So yeah, I really appreciated you hearing me, because it was a hard thing to say to other people, to loved ones who were staying at home, because I cared for them too, but yeah.
And Mary Beth, you're saying that people wanted to feel better, like that it made them feel better to say to you or to healthcare workers, you're a hero, you're a soldier that's brave, that's fighting this battle. And that you were thinking, I wish you wouldn't do that, even though it makes you feel better.
I couldn't hear what you said.
You were saying, I wish you wouldn't do that, even though it makes you feel better. It's actually not helpful right now.
Yeah, I wish there was something different that could have been done. Like, yeah, it's nice to say thank you to people, but being a social worker, you know, I would love for society to value what I do more than it does financially, the way we're treated, etc. So having this happen where even more is being asked of us with no additional help. We didn't get hazard pay, we didn't have, so that was hard, because those are the kinds of idea you don't ever hear, like somebody in finance being called a hero or a billionaire being called a hero, right? It's the people who are risking their lives and not really getting compensated for it who are being called heroes. So it's more that, like, thinking about who do we call heroes.
I think I'm getting you, actually. Like, it's sort of like we say teachers are heroes. It's like teachers like, how about instead of calling me a hero, you just pay me a living wage?
Yes, exactly.
How about you give me enough money for my school supplies? Stop calling me a hero if that's you think you're compensating me.
Yeah, we should all be allowed to have safety in our jobs and enough money to take care of ourselves and our families, and it shouldn't be that some people are just called heroes and given less.
I've always been curious, Mary Beth, whether one of the lines in the poem made sense or came across. The bit about "we will fight you on the beaches." Did you get the reference in that?
Yeah, I'm old enough to get that. Maybe if I were like 20 years younger, I wouldn't.
Is there anybody on our screen right now or anybody in the audience who's sort of wondering, like, Jenny? Okay. Well, just to complete the circle for that, it's Winston Churchill giving a speech about never giving up in the face of the Nazi invasion. He's saying, like, we will fight them on the mountaintops and we will fight them in the fields and whatever. That's what was coming to my mind listening to Mary Beth in that moment of that labeling of these healthcare workers. Like, look how strong you are, and I'm going to give you this praise for showing up in this way.
That's great. Frankie, I actually know that from my grandparents. I was like, oh, that's great. I love that you brought that line actually stood out for me. And so how, like, you already covered like how you decided what themes to focus on. Did the poem happen? Did you write the poem and then you picked the title? We talk about that. Did the title come first?
Yeah, and Mary Beth, I think when I sent you the poem, it didn't have a title on it, so you may not even know that it poem.
I don't know there's a title.
Well, I titled it "Heroes and Soldiers." Okay. And today I think would have seen that in the folder where we had the file stored, where it's got the title of the file. heroes and soldiers. No, I thought of it afterwards, yeah, sort of looking at the poem, and looking at it, just a couple of lines in the poem. And as a poet, I think the titles of poems add a lot of information, and they can give like the same with a painting also. It can give a completely different understanding of what one is looking at when they say. I'm actually in, FYI, I'm in the Getty Museum right now in Los Angeles. This is why there's a tray return sign pointing to my head. So thinking about this, like when I say the title of the poem is Heroes and Soldiers, it is adding this information that is what the poem is about. There's lots of things happening in the poem, but this poem is about the tension and the internal conflict that comes with those labels for the people that they are labeled with them.
Yeah, I think what stood out, what I shared with you both was this theme, this struggle with identity. And Mary Beth, you touched on that somewhat already, about the difference between being a caregiver and a soldier, and you didn't sign up for that. And I'm wondering, today, as like we look at a poem that captures a quality of the time, today, how do you feel? Has anything shifted for you? What's remained?
I mean, the time was terrifying. So the terror isn't there. And I do feel much more like I can be a carer than someone braving a dangerous situation, where people are fighting for their lives all the time and for other people's lives. I mean, it really was. I've never been in a war zone, so I can't say, but it felt very dangerous. I walked every day. I walked by triage tents outside the emergency room, which was right next to the entrance I went in, and there were morgue trucks, and it was very scary. Now, my dad is trying to FaceTime me. Sorry, Dad. So it's very different. I definitely feel like I can be more of a caregiver now. I don't care to go back to a time like that ever in my lifetime. And I don't think anybody of us in healthcare expected to ever have to experience something like that without choosing it, right? Like there's people who go to places around the world that are having epidemics or other health crises, but this was everywhere. So I definitely feel much more like a caregiver than a soldier now. Yeah, but the being able to do the poem with Freddie or Frankie, sorry, was just, I had very few outlets at the time because everyone was scared. And to be able to talk with someone and really say what was going on, and I hadn't really processed it all myself, before talking to him. So I just really appreciated having that. And the poem that came out of it is just beautiful. I have it kept, and I don't think I'll ever lose it. So thank you, Frankie.
Thank you, Margaret. Oh, I mean, Mary Beth.
Nice.
Thank you both for sharing today your process and the obvious. Even though you haven't met, there's a connection between the two of you. That's obvious. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Deji.
Mindy Shah.
My teenage daughter has a choral pops concert tonight that's 90s music. They've had 3 recent snow days and they are completely unprepared. So it's going to be a good 2 hours of bumbled 90s music after this. So that's why my word of the day was 90s music. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of what got me into the Listening Poets course. Jate, I think that's what you had thought would be helpful. And then maybe after I talk a little bit about that and kind of my perspective on it as a clinician, I'll read the poem. So I'm a doc. I'm a geriatrician and a hospice and palliative care doc. And before I went to medical school, I was in an MFA program for creative writing and had some experiences as a cardiac patient that had me defer from that program, and it changed my whole career. So when I heard about the Good Listening Project from my boss, who had a listening poet session herself, she's like, you should look into this. And so I Googled it and I was like, oh my gosh, this was meant to be. And it felt so good to get back in that creative space, that poetry space. I had done not a lot of writing in about 25 years, just with medical training and having a kid, and I would do stuff from time to time. But it really felt like reconnecting with a larger purpose. And so I was in the first cohort of the class, and I wasn't particularly surprised by the writing techniques that we talked about, or even the techniques about listening, because as a palliative care doc, I had heard a lot of that before. What I was surprised was by the passion, the creativity of my cohort classmates. I remember after one session, I was like, it's like being in church. It's like being in this spiritual space with these people, and everybody's there 100%, and everybody's there with all their love and presence and supporting each other. And I know it was kind of hard to sign off at the end of every class. And Greg, I know that you were in that cohort with me and can probably testify to this too. But it was an amazing experience. I struggle with words and kind of how to describe that, but it felt like coming home, like coming full circle. I think my work as a listener poet for sure is influenced by my role in healthcare. Part of it's that I have a decent guess what struggles and stresses other clinicians are facing. I mean, not that everybody has the same experience, and not that everybody has the same pressures, but I have a sense of the culture Um, and I can also speak the language, right? So when there's a clinician talking to me and they're using maybe verbiage that to describe their experience, I speak that. I can hear, and I can use that language back with them. Um, there's always a question about self-disclosure. I don't often say, hey, yeah, I'm in healthcare too, at the beginning of a session. I will occasionally use it later on if I think it's helpful in making a connection. More recently, we've had a series of poems with people in the major American organization for hospice and palliative care. And that's an organization that I belong in. So I've been disclosing a little bit more of my conversations with those people because it has, our situations have so many similarities. It has freed up communication in some way. I like to think. But sometimes I don't say what I do at all. And that was the case in this poem, actually, that I brought today. I did have a disclosure with this poeme, but I'll talk about what that was in a little bit. Dite, can you pull the poem up onto the screen because I had to change computers. I don't have it on this one. And while we're doing that, this poem was part of a project called Health for Equity. And this poeme, I think it was focusing on the needs of Black men with specific cancers. And, okay, yeah, I can see it. This was my only poeme from that group that I've worked with, but I'll tell you why I picked it out in a little bit. So it's called Patient. Patient. Your kid said to cut it out. You weren't so sure as the screen lit your face, scrolling study after study, but the patients and the research weren't Black like you. Would the findings translate across skin, bones, history? Did this absence stem from a fear of experiments and a need to protect the body, no prodding, no nakedness? It was an insurance physical that caught your PSA, though you'd notice changes when you pissed. This is what happens when you get older. You watched, your doctors watched, and waited 3 years before submitting to the knife. It was only then that your son and daughter shared their fear and their relief. Is there a second page to that? Yeah. Shared their fear and their relief that it was out. Relearning your body, what it means to be a man. A move to the coast to be closer to family, with the California sun warm upon your face, your skin, your eyes squinting a bit to see the road ahead. So this poeme is a middle-aged Black man who had been diagnosed and treated for prostate cancer. And he had actually had a fairly positive experience as a patient. He didn't feel like there was any really outward or visible um, difference maybe in his treatment at the hands of his healthcare team based on race. But he did notice that in the long period of time he spent looking through studies to see if whether watchful waiting for prostate cancer rather than jumping to surgery right away was a viable alternative. And he looked in the studies, and they were promising that you could wait and be patient, like the title of the poem. But they didn't include a lot of African American patients, which is the case with a lot of medical research. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But, you know, we talked a little bit about why maybe certain Black men are loath to get health care or screenings, or, you know, is there a distrust of the medical system? And, you know, there's people that are treating you that maybe don't look like you. And it brought up all these things about how different his experience might be. I didn't tell him that I was in healthcare, right? I did tell him that I was a cancer patient about kind of near the end of our session. And it was just a small reference to that. But it did open up our conversation. And, you know, we found that we had a lot of similarities, right? I mean, we got a lot of differences, obviously, racially. Him being a man and my being a woman, his being a patient, my being a doctor. You know, my being the listener poet, him being the poemee, but we kind of connected over. We were both cancer patients, and we both had procedures done to our bodies that changed our views of ourselves, that challenged our thoughts about sexuality, sexual function, body image, things like that, and kind of learning how to reimagine yourself as still yourself but different at the other end of the whole treatment process. I wasn't sure what he was going to think of my poem. I sent it off and I'm like, you know, kind of a little nervous. Is he going to relate with this? And he did. I do hear back a lot from my poemies, which I'm lucky in that, and he liked it and it resonated with him. You know, I think I chose this poem because it is showing the differences in our backgrounds, but how through this kind of listener poet and poemee relationship, we are able to find similarities, and it's just a nice juxtaposition of similar and different. You know, I think it also talks a lot of, or it also makes me think a lot about people's different experiences in the healthcare system as patients, and that it's not always all bad, right? I was worried that when he was going to tell his story that it was going to be, you know, he didn't feel valued or he didn't feel like he was listened to, and he actually had a really positive experience as a patient. His biggest struggle, besides the side effects of the treatment, was with his family, who didn't have the patience that he had, and wanted him to go right to surgery. The title, I know, Dete, you called that out. Yeah, it's meant to be dual layered, right? So patient as in being a patient, but also patient as in sitting and watching and waiting to see how things play out, but also just patient with life, right? So knowing that his life was going to be upended, his body was going to be changed. He moved through that. He physically moved locations to the coast to be closer to his family and to have better weather. So there's patience on multiple fronts. So yeah, so I'm going to stop my little monologue there and see if anybody has questions.
I felt, you know, when I read the origin story, and yeah, what you shared so much, but this access point of commonality that you were able to find in the midst of this environment of opposites, I think it's just so beautiful.
And you have to be really careful with self-disclosure. And because you don't want to turn the focus away from the poemee, or in medicine, the patient, onto you, right? You don't want to put them in a position where they need to respond to your needs. But I feel like used correctly or used carefully, it can facilitate connection and help with conversations, right? So there are times when, you know, my identifying as a cancer survivor or as a physician opens up a level of, well, you get it to a certain level, right? We never totally get it, but you understand maybe a bit of where I'm coming from. And that has helped connections. And yeah, you just have to be careful how you use it.
I just want to say, you know how much I got love for you, but just hearing that poem and relating to so many different fronts, in the sense of me losing my dad to esophageal cancer at 17 in my senior year of high school, and also understanding the challenges of being an African American male, and unfortunately having to be an Air Force veteran and deal with certain things, and challenges as well with the VA. So I just want to tell you that I appreciate you. I know you've heard this time and time again, but I truly do. And just your tenderness to write that poem, it's made my day. So thank you very much.
You don't have a Rumi quote for me?
After.
Okay.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Gregory.
I do want to add one thing. I was nervous going into that poem. I felt like, what right do I have to listen to this man's story, right? It's a man, he's black, he's got a whole set of things going on that I can't really relate to, right? But I want to. I want to be there for him and help him. And it didn't take much more than just listening, right? That met some of that need. So again, just showing the power of just being present.
Linda. So Linda and I, we met in the fall, but at the end of the summer of last
Yeah,
year.
I think almost at least half a year ago at this point.
Yeah. it was definitely a moment. I know in your life, and can you share a little bit about yourself, everyone?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Linda. I am currently a medicine resident in my second year. So when I met for my session, like Dete said, it was honestly a low point of my training. I think I'd experienced a lot of burnout for many, many months already. And then essentially had a really difficult month, was coming off a really challenging rotation and was just not really in a good place. And that was the place where I met her. And I remember like my mind was just very frazzled. I very much did not feel like myself in a lot of ways. And so that was what I entered the session with.
I think you just come out, she shared, you just had come out of a 95-hour work week.
It was something crazy. Yeah, it was not not a recommended experience. Yeah, so I think I was just like physically so exhausted. I think mentally, emotionally, so drained. And I was just at a point where like patient care didn't feel like there was joy in it. Like that's where I was. And the concept of identity has come up a lot today. And I think for me, my struggle with burnout has always had a lot to do with identity, right? Like on one hand, I think I've often viewed medicine as something that has felt very constricting or almost like suffocating of my ability to be other identities outside of just a healthcare provider, especially at this phase of my training. And then even as a physician, with the system that we work in, I think I often felt like I really could not be the physician that I wanted to be, and I couldn't provide the care that I wanted to give because there are so many like competing demands and just so many things vying for your attention at any given time. So I think I was feeling, yeah, just almost an identity crisis of sorts. And I think I was like trying to find my way back to feeling a little bit more centered.
And I remember that listening to you and how that was really present about how what you wanted to do was why you wanted to practice medicine was because you wanted to be have take a meaningful part in other people's lives. And there was a moment that you had with the patient where you kind of showed up in a way that you didn't feel comfortable with because you were so burnt out, you're so tired, you're agitated. Actually, I believe it was with a family member with a patient. And like those moments those are the moments that kind of jarring your system, like this is not what I signed up for. I signed up to care, to be a caregiver, to be present, and I know that you didn't feel supported by the system either, and you didn't have any time for self-care. And one of the things that stood out, and I'm going to read the poem, was that self-care was a form of rebellion, as in residency, and you were like, you didn't have any time to be, for self-care. And when you did, it was like, I'm going to do it, I'm rebelling. And so when I'd asked,
I'm sorry to interrupt. That actually brings to mind Frankie's poem and this idea of like respite from chaos, right? That resonated so strongly with me because that's what it felt like. Like I was doing this because I had to, like, and this want to just do something good for the sake of the fact that you're doing something good, I think is something that felt so distant at the time. to say, I think you're still muted.
Energy. Let me go put gas in the car for you. Someone in this world would do that for me. When you are okay, I am okay too. Batteries to bluff, serpentine hills. I do need to hear the crashing waves in the sea. Let me go put gas in the car for you. Questioning if what you're doing is true. Retreat to rooftops should you need to flee. When you are okay, I am okay too. If dancing is what you wish to pursue, sway eye to eye so hearts to hearts can see. Let me go put gas in the car for you. Whatever it is, no need to push through. Rebel with self-care. Slow down, count to 3. When you are okay, I am okay too. Change directions without knowing what to do. All roads route back to where you're meant to be. Let me go put gas in the car for you. When you are okay, I am okay too. And so I want to share this because I know one of the questions that you had asked me was whose voice was speaking. And Linda had shared that these are some of the places where she found, her respite, was hiking when she went back home, and her relationship over the years with her father had deepened. And so, and she shared this moment that she was getting ready to leave the house, and he was sitting at the table having a meal. And in the middle of his lunch, as she was walking out, he said, "Wait, let me go put gas in the car for you." And I still get so emotional about that. And it was an emotional share. And he said, "No one would do that for me. Would care for you like that." And it just touched me because it was kind of reflected and mirrored the care that you wanted to give, like that identity, and that was being given to you, in such a loving way. And you had asked for the poem to be this kind of, I guess, respite in a flower in springtime, a place where you can go to for comfort. And even in that, you had felt a little guilty about wanting that for yourself. Like asking for that was a form of rebellion. Yeah, this was the first time I wrote this type of poem too. So this session, like, you had such a strong sense of yourself, even though I shared with you, even though you were frazzled and burnt out, there was just a really strong center. And so it encouraged me to kind of take a risk, and I think in the craft, to try something different. And I'm curious, so.
I didn't know that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. It was a structure that I was like, I'm willing to do this. And you encouraged me to do that. And indirectly, And so I'm curious though, what voice did you hear? Whose voice did you hear?
I think we heard several different voices. Sorry, there's a little echo. I definitely heard my dad's voice in that line, pretty much taken directly from something he had said to me. I think with a lot of the description around the different places and things that I found comfort in, that voice I didn't ascribe to any one particular person necessarily, but it felt more like the voice of almost a witness or a voice of comfort in some ways. And then the line that really got me thinking was the one that said, "When you're okay, I'm okay too." And I was trying to sort of think about, whose voice that would be. And I think that one could actually be a couple of people as well. I could hear my own voice in that potentially, right? So sort of like the protected inner part of myself, providing some of that reflection for myself or reassurance for myself. And then I think I actually also heard my dad's voice in that as well. And I don't know if that was intended or not, but that seemed very in line with something that he would say and feel. So I think that was like the combination of different voices that I was hearing throughout.
It's definitely layered, especially when, you as a caregiver, as a doctor, like when you're not okay, when you're burnt out, we aren't okay. The people that you care for, and quality of care is impacted. Is impacted when our caregivers are stressed and they're burnt out and they're scared. All the things that we can cover today, that Mary Beth had shared, and this is a part. And I know I'd ask you as a champion. I know you're a champion of our work. To talk about maybe something a little bit about that. We're over time, so I just want to acknowledge that we are over. We're a little bit over. But if you don't mind, if you have time, finish the conversation. And
yeah, I can wrap things up. I think for me, and I reached out to you, I remember very quickly about this, because when I read the poem, I really felt it. I think what was so powerful about the poem for me was the fact that at that time in my life, I was going through an experience that I was really struggling to make sense of, right? Like I was really struggling to understand how I had gotten to that point, who I had become, so many years leading up to this point that I just felt like I was not happy with, essentially. And what your poem, and I think what our session together helped, was make sense of an experience that really I was struggling to make sense of. I think it gave back some meaning into this place that I was at. And that was what was really special about it. And I know you had sent me some thoughts also about how, in some ways that shared connection that we had was unexpected for you as well. And I think that was unexpected also in a really good way for me to hear. Because like you said, I was feeling a little bit self-conscious about sort of the dedicated attention in that spotlight. But at the end of the day, I feel like the session that we had together was really sort of almost a sacred space that we had together. Like I shared this experience with you. I trusted you with that information, right? With what I was going through. And then the poem, sort of as the icing on the cake, was like a memento of that moment in time for me. So thank you for all of that.
And, thank you so much. That trust means so much to me and to all of us. This is about trusting each other and the work that we do, and sharing and being open, and touching these vulnerable places where we have a tendency to bruise easily, but having the trust in that moment, in these moments in our sessions is really just such a gift. So thank you so much for being here today and showing up and sharing. And everyone, thank you so much. I know we're over time, and I appreciate everyone who has stayed on. I think everybody is here. I'm removing the spotlight. And Helly. So yeah, we're 11 minutes over time. And so it got really juicy there for a moment, and all of those shares and the conversation was just really was rich today. So thank you so much. Kelly, what stood out for you today? Maybe some words that we can take away and reflect upon after our time together today.
Sure. There was just so much to capture. I couldn't, I was trying to pop in some quotes that I could get, but I also was trying to remain present. Yeah, I love the theme of identity that came up kind of throughout all of the poems, and how that affected the poemee and the listener poet. That was a really interesting theme that kind of surfaced, which I think is worth exploring and thinking about further. And labels, identities, and how that kind of affects the dynamic and disclosure and connecting with each other. So that was really beautiful to see. There was one question that came up for Mindy's, and Gina had asked, Mindy, as a healthcare provider, do you ever wish you could be the poemee? Can you be a poemee for yourself? I thought that was beautiful. Beautiful question.
You might be able to be a poemee for yourself, but I'm not sure you would not. Oh, I don't know if I would be writing poems for myself. I don't know if I would use words. But I have enough friends that listen to me talk about some of these things that I feel like within my specialty of hospice and palliative, we're all kind of listening poets all the time. And so I have a lot of support that way. But yeah, it's a good question. Maybe
Thank
I'm a
you.
listener poet to myself when I make my tea or something.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And thank you so much for staying with us. I know that we went over time. We appreciate you, and anyone wants to stay back and have a little chat afterward. I will be on for another 5 minutes.
Thank you, Jite, for hosting us. Thank you, Mindy and Jite, and Mary Beth for sharing. It was really awesome.